Alright, I got live feed.
Okay, welcome everyone to the next iteration of these super podcasts, and I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight or this early morning, wherever you're at, you Euros. And we've got a bunch of people here today, and basically what we're going to talk about are a couple of classes, Skald, Thane, Pally, and Champ. And um, will be the last podcast regarding specific classes before sort of a switch next week to something pretty cool that Lovely's putting on. So definitely tune in next week. But if you're here now, good for you. And let's go around. Maybe from vent we'll just go down. And each of you, do me a big favor. Go ahead and introduce yourself, your play style, the classes you like to do, what you're here to sort of represent, and then um, how you play your class, and then we'll go back around and start the next question. So Joe, kick us off, please.
Hey, I'm Zadrie. I play Skald in Crows of Winter. For the most part, I do small man, 8-man sort of gameplay, and every once in a while I'll run around solo, just kind of see what's going on out there.
Capt, are you here to participate?
I'm here, buddy. Kaptkent, GM of the Scarlet Knights. I lead a BG usually daily during the day U.S. time, afternoon European time.
And Reck?
I play Paladin Overa, primarily two-hand solo Paladin.
Sorry, one more question for you, Reck. Do you do any 8-manning as well, or are you mostly a solo player?
Primarily solo. I do have some small man Paladins that I tinker around with, and it's been a while, but I used to 8-man as well. It's been since the classic server though, since I played a Paladin 8-man.
Okay, thanks. And Silent?
Hi guys, I'm Silenttspeed. I run my own guild called Order of the Silver Flame, and primarily I run with BGs. I'll run with Cap during the day, and I'll run with the US Primetime BG of the evenings. However, that's not just my only style of play. I'm happy to do 8-mans, small mans, and solo. Although as you get towards the small man solo area, I don't really do as much. So, but that that's about as far as I go.
And Tanky?
Yes, sir. I'm representing the Thane class. Currently run rank 10. Trying to think here. For the most part, I group and Zerg surf. I don't really solo with this class. I know it's possible. I know people do it. I just don't. So I'm just here to help out.
And finally, as instructed, hashtag Vegamite. What are you here for?
2016. But I am representing the champion. I played it a few times, and it's pretty fun.
Okay, now maybe briefly, because I'm sure you guys could just expound on this one, but why do you play DAOC instead of something else? What gets you excited about this game? Just real briefly, Joe.
The one thing I really like about DAOC is the guild that I play in. I've made a lot of really good friends here, and I really don't think I'd be able to duplicate that in any other MMO that's out there right now.
Anybody else? You guys can feel free to just jump in here. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I've been like Joe just said. I've been here long enough now that I know a lot of my guildies and guys I run with. I know 'em as well as I know my neighbors. So it would, like you said, it'd be hard to leave this for another game. But I was brought this game originally. I was brought this game. Buddy of mine showed up and he said, "Man, I got a game for you to play. I got a game for you to play." He said, and he said, "I think it's got a character on you like," and he come up with a Thane on it. Now I think looking back, I might have made another tune as my main other than Thane, but now I'm kind of stuck with it at 12L6. And he brought it to me, and I'll tell you what, I really got into it. I just love this kind of character that has, the multiple things, especially with the CLs now. You can actually throw a heal in, I can res, and I like that multiple tune, that I can do lots of things with. It's because I group a lot. I rarely solo play.
Yeah, and on the same vein there, really, I've I played this game since the early days, since Shrouded Doors, and obviously I was a lot younger then, and I didn't understand the game quite as much as I did as I do now. But I found it pretty easy to leave this game in the past for other MMOs. However, I always find myself coming back to this one. It's just got that appeal to me. I tend to find myself in a good place in the community. People that are very friendly and open with themselves, and people I can be open with as well. So I think that's where I'm kept in the game.
Would it be fair to say you have
sure.
more friends in game than in real life?
Of course, and I think pretty much most people could say that. I mean,
I know
fair
I
enough,
do.
not friends in the same kind of way as people you'd know in real life, but you get to know people through this game and talk to people from countries you never thought you'd have communication with, and that's an excellent part about any game.
That's exactly right. Just to tag on it is, you build a rapport with a lot of people, and you start getting into groups, start getting into guilds. You start, flowing with a lot of people. I remember when I was running with Kaptkent a lot in TSK, and you build upon that, and it's nice to come in and everybody knows kind of what's going on. They'll say, hey, how's your day, kind of thing, kind of like you would in a normal life. But at the same time, like Reese said, you can talk to people all over the world. We got Anna Marie that comes on. We got Silent that's on. You got Smeagol. I mean, we got a lot of people from the UK and other areas, and it's great to kind of have that worldly, I don't want to say chat, but that interaction.
Okay, well, let's get a little bit, thanks guys, let's get a little bit into maybe the specifics. Obviously we're here today to talk about 4 specific classes. I know a lot of times people are curious, especially returning players. They want to know the basics, what's the most useful class to play? Is there a hard, learning curve to get spun up on this class? And so I think these podcasts can be useful also for that. And so maybe to start this off, hashtag Vegamite 2016. Can you just give us a spec or two that's good for the champ?
I always preferred playing full two-handed, and they recently put back, I won't say recently, but they put back the anytime back stun, which is really convenient. Whenever I'm playing a class, I usually prefer to play the spec that kind of streamlines it. And a lot of people would argue to play shield and slam for the pin, but I prefer just to keep it simple and stay two-handed Valor, and then be able to debuff people, backstun them, go to town.
Okay, Reck, what would you say for Pally? Obviously, if you don't mind, could you give us maybe a solo spec and one that's maybe better for 8-man?
Yeah, I find personally I like to go with the two hands, similar to like what Vegamite 2016 they were saying. I like the damage output of it. I feel like it's the less cowardly route to take, and it is a lot easier than trying to swap between two. The route that I've gone is completely two-handed. A lot of people will switch it up and go with 44 two-hand rather than the 50 early rank. I prefer full 50, and then 48 chance, and then about 31, I believe it is, thrust and rest parry. If you prefer to go with the shield, I usually wouldn't suggest going past 35. I find 42 is just a waste for the anytime stun. The back styles and side styles are easy enough to land in the game where you shouldn't waste the points on it. And I would go, usually if you're going shield, I believe it's about 34 weapon. But pretty much 48 chance for the most part.
Okay, now maybe you Thanes together, what are your favorite specs, I guess?
You or me, Thane?
Go ahead, Cap.
Well, anymore, it's basically the 50 SC is almost a given because we have to have all that stuff. It'd be nice. The old cookie cutter used to be 46, 44, 42, being SC, hammer, and shield. But now we need that 50 SC, so it's 50 SC. And I would, a lower RR, I might go with a 44 hammer, but I go 39 hammer because I've got a lot of pluses to my skill, But the good cookie cutter, for a guy starting, he wants a cast, he wants a melee, the whole 9 yards, is the 50 SC, 39 hammer, and go the 42 shield, which I know it's only a 5-second stun now, which I don't know why, which we can have a 1-minute route, but my 7-second stun was out of the question, But I still like the stun, so I would still stay with the shield. It also gives you a lot of defense when you get in a mass of them and you get a tank train on you. I can pull out my large shield and I can at least defend myself.
Yeah, I wanna kind of jump in with that with Captain. No matter what, you're gonna have to go to 50 storm calling. That right off the bat is a given. You cannot go anything less because you give up so much. You give up the doom hammer, you give up the chain lightning, you give up the 10% pierce. You have to do it. It's done. Everything else after that is kind of up to player. I used to play just like Captain just said as a spec. Recently I changed just because I wanted to try something different. I'm now 50 storm, 50 axe, just because I like the secondary style and the damage, the DD that it offers, and it's pretty potent. I don't have much defense, but I still have a little bit of shield if I need to. But that was the one thing I never liked about the 42 shield slam is, once all the hybrids got the nerf for the 5 seconds, it took a long time. You might slam, but you had that 3-second delay before you could actually start casting again. So it really didn't make much difference to really slam or not. So it was great for an interrupt, yeah, but I'm trying the 50 axe routine right now, and that's just the other spec. I mean, you can spec several ways, but 50 storm calling is a given. It has to be done.
Do you guys change your RA setup depending on the spec? I mean, I feel like that's the biggest difference between like a solo Thane, group Thane, like a Zerg Thane, is how you'd spec your RAs.
Oh, you bet. If I was to solo, I would totally change. I'm for survivability with the group right now.
Correct.
Because you got to be able to stay in there with the interrupts and protect your group,
Yeah, I mean, I don't have IP in my build at all, and I'm running rank 10, and I don't have IP at all because I don't solo. So obviously, I'd have to have that. I mean, given.
Do you ever feel like you've been kind of pigeonholed into being like a hybrid Thane versus like a caster Thane because you're like a Norseman or anything like that? Because I feel like if I made my Thane anything other than a Frost Elf, I would probably have rolled it by now. It's either Vulcan or Frost Elf, because to me, a Thane in 2016 is there to cast and maybe peel into a little melee, but it's just it's there to cast.
I like your thought on that, and certainly Captain has some experience on this. My personal feelings on this is you play a hybrid class play it to its maximum potential. And that's what I do. I'm built to completely go storm calling 100%. You know, I have the suit 120, I think, and piety and dex. You know, I'm built to do that. But let's be honest, there's going to be somebody out there that's not really too happy about having hammers dropped on their head, which means they're going to come after me. And that's when I like to be able to bring out the hammer or the shield and be able to go to town and not be, you know, a weak kind of person. I don't want to be a caster and only a caster. I want to be able to survive in melee if I have to. And that's just, to me, that's the strength of this class, is to be able to do both.
Okay, well, let's get to the Skalds and give them a chance to give us a couple of good specs there. Joe, do you want to start off, or Zadrie?
Sure. Well, with my Skald, I'm pretty much I guess more of a solo spec with it. I ended up going with the 46 battle song, 44 axe, and the rest in parry. It's worked pretty well, but I've actually been considering changing that around a bit and going with full 50 battle songs. Mostly to get the higher level shouts in there, just to do a little bit more damage, and I'm trying to interrupt some folks. For the most part, with my RA spec, I've gone very, very group friendly with my RAs. I do have Ignore Pain 1 for emergency situations, but otherwise I'm like Purge 3, Immolating Melodies 3, and also Anger of the Gods 2. And I find that combo really helps the group out, especially in like small man situations where you might be lacking like a full-time healer. You just hit Immolating Melodies and it's essentially a nice group heal for you. And I find those work really well together.
Okay, Silence, anything to add to that?
Well, I obviously, as I said, I don't really run with a solo small man attitude most of the time. I primarily group. Obviously, I do experience all kinds of RVR, so my spec differs. I do like to test different things from time to time. Currently, this is just like a test spec. I'm 50 battle songs, 40 hammer, and 15 parry. I find that if I have to drop my hammer and rely, and increase my parry, I'm relying too much on that kind of defense. Whereas right now, I find that having that extra couple of points in hammer where I didn't have before, I'm doing a lot more damage, so I don't need to rely on that defense. And along the same lines, my RAs, they're group friendly, but also at the same time they give me that survivability. They're not as group friendly as they could be. Obviously, there are more abilities that we could have, that we do have in our arsenal that we could use. However, I run with SOS 2, Purge 3. I have IP 3 in there because I find myself up at the front lines most of the time, so a 50% heal, instantly is very useful to me. I also run with Avoidance and Magic, Toughness, Org Strength, so I feel like for me survivability is necessary with the primary playstyle I have.
Okay, cool. So a couple of you actually started alluding on it. Let's talk about your RA setup for these classes. Zadrie, do you have anything to add for the Skalds that you do for RAs?
The only other RA I have that I didn't mention was just SOS 2. And for what I do, that's perfectly acceptable and works just fine for me.
Yeah, I will jump in there and agree that I think SOS 2 is pretty much a staple. I don't think you can obviously go higher and it does help you, but SOS 2 is sort of like your minimum. If you stay at that minimum, you're okay. You can go higher, you don't need to though. Your group, should be fine with what you have at SOS 2.
What about first aid? Let's say you guys decided to play solo. Would you consider running some first aid in there?
I run first aid 1 constantly, so when I jump off a tower, I pop my first aid and I'm right on somebody's butt. Full health.
Well, I think for Skald, it's good. You know, it can be useful. However, I wouldn't put it in. I wouldn't put it in with the rest of my realm abilities. I feel like the way my character is set up, and the way I play, I don't think first aid is as necessary. I mean, at level 1 a 25% heal is nice. Obviously you can't be in combat while you do it, so that's where I feel IP has a significant advantage. And as well as that, some of the items I have in my template allow me to get a heal that's, you know, almost as good as that 25% you get from first aid through a variety of combos and bonuses.
What about you, Thanes? And I realize you're both a little higher in the realm rank, and some of the people listening to this are probably going to start out low. Can you give us kind of a good progression of your first 4 RAs that you'd want to get?
Go ahead, Captain.
Well, first off, I like IP2. And I also go, like I said, I go with the survivability, so I'm high on cons and I'm high toughness. So I'm grabbing up all the realm points I can get, so when I do hit IP, I'm not healing 2,000, I'm healing 3,000. You know what I mean? And another thing is you know, a lot of people, they want to be a Thane caster. They want to be a Thane caster, so they're always looking at the AUG decks and this and that. Really, to protect yourself and stay out there with a Thane, you're going to have to pull out your hammer and fight. And that's where I stayed away from the Frostoffs and those guys, because it's easier starting off to build like a troll or a Norseman to that than having the low strength. And you know, when you hit somebody, you're hitting them like a healer, not like a tank, you know. But I definitely like the IP2. If you want a solo, that it's definitely not a Thane, because we're just too low hit points to start off with. So you definitely need to
Now,
build that
Tinky,
up
you
first.
play a little bit more of a, you play a little bit more of like a caster thing, don't you?
Yes, I do.
So how would you? Yeah.
My prerogative, the way I build is I try to, I guess if I was lower or say R5 or less, I would be looking at obviously probably Purge 2 and have that set to the side. Then I will start looking at getting my augmented dex to at least 338 to the first level of the hammers. And then start putting into maybe some Master of Magery and Wild Power. That would probably be where I'm at for the most part. Since I don't solo and I group or Zerg, one of the biggest things that I am very, very adamant about is Static Tempest. I think that really is a good thing for the Thanes to have. It helps in going up in Lord rooms. So I think that kind of helps. You know, you can definitely add all the passives in the world for melee or for casting or for survivability. I kind of take mine towards casting, you know, the augmented acuity, the augmented dexterity, the Master of Magery, and some Wild Power. I try to keep that at level as I'm going up, except for the dex, obviously. I'm just trying to reach the break points. Once I get to that, then I start throwing into avoidance of magic, you know, because, you know, this is a magic game. So I try to live a little bit longer.
AOM3 at least on the Thane is what you want to achieve.
Yes, sir.
Are you trying to hit that 392?
No, not me. Not at all. I am at, I want to say 370, I think is where I'm at. 370, 77, something like that.
But just for a little food for thought, a Thane can actually get 50% crit chance by running Dual Threat and Wild Power 9, which is kind of interesting because it's probably the only caster that's actually able to do that. So, I mean, it's one of those things where if you stacked your instant cast, and then Chain Lightning, you have like 100% chance of critting at least twice.
You got a good point there, and that that might be something I may start looking into is going to the dual threat. I've never actually looked in that RA, and that's definitely a great thing to bring brought up. I'm glad you said that. I can definitely look into that. This class is built to go several different ways, and I like that ability. That's why I like hybrids. They're not one of one. They're several. You can do one of the other, and I think Thanes do a great job, especially when they, coming up into a Lord's room. They have a great RR5. They got the ST. They got several instas. They can pop mock and go AoE hammers. I mean, there's a lot there, and I really, really think this class brings a lot to the table to help them out.
Well, one thing I wasn't going to say, but yeah, since he brought up the ST, one of the things I do is, like, if I go in to a bunch of guys, say they're clumped together, IST, I automatically mock, which I wasn't going to say, and then I start throwing my hammer. And I'll tell you what, I can stand there and just beat on people with those hammers. If guys want to go that direction, it's a quick way to really, you don't have to boost anything else. You've just automatically got that quick with ST mock and then start throwing your hammers.
Okay, we're starting to get some pretty good questions here on the feed, so I'd like to maybe finish real quick. Reck and then hashtag Vegamite 2K16, and then we'll get to some of these questions.
For the RAs that I usually go with, I like to have a strong purge, and when I'm solo, I like to max out my parry rate, especially being two-handed. That's really the main line of defense. Whenever I'm specking to go with in a small man or in a larger group setting, I prefer to go with Det. With the lack of stoicism, I find I'm held out of the fight a lot if I don't have a decent Det with roots, or if I don't have a D-Meser in the group in a small man situation. The Mez can be very, very annoying. Later on, I've tried out a couple different things between Wrath of the Champion, which I found to be extremely helpful as a solo if you're running Spirit debuff weapons, or legendaries rather. And then there's the Vehement Renewal and the Anger of the Gods. I find pretty good in a small man or larger group settings. Running in the situation of like just Zerg surfing, I wouldn't really worry about those. I'd go with more survivable RAs, just passives, since the majority of the time there's, you're just running in there into choke points and dying, or absorbing as much damage as possible before you die.
Okay, and Vega?
For the champion, I would do, obviously for a solo, you do the classic mastery parry and IP, all good stuff, purge. But for group, you obviously go Det, avoidance and magic. But it's also interesting to say that I couldn't think of any other class that didn't have access to either charge or stoicism, tank-wise. Maybe a Skald, but I mean,
I can name
it's kind of a... Yeah, go for it. I mean, what classes don't have stoicism and charge?
That's a combination of the both, or individual?
That's a tank, yeah.
Paladins, champions, and things don't, and also Skalds. Actually, everybody in this group right here does not have stoicism, and I would say Skalds do have SOS, which is kind of in their rank 5, but
yeah, I guess, yeah, because I was ignoring Thanes and Veilwalkers because they can cast, so that doesn't count them as a tank to me. But yeah, I guess Paladins.
Well, I like the Thanes Static Tempest. I think that helps out a lot to kind of lock people down and their ability to cast, like you said. But champions and Paladins really get the short end of the stick there. I do want to say I find it a little crazy that Maulers get stoicism, but slightly heavier tanks don't.
I mean, it's been passed out to a few classes recently, so.
Okay, so one of the questions here that popped up, and I assume he's serious. H Little wants to know more about Thanes and 8-mans. Why aren't they that viable, and how do you get the most out of them if you do include them? I mean, I know I've seen them out and around, but if one of you guys want to try and tackle that, that'd be awesome.
I don't want to necessarily take this from the Thane people, but I would say it's mostly player versus the actual class itself. I mean, a caster Thane templated to new card can insta-blap any sorcerer on ink if they debuff, chain lightning, insta, and cast once. And the chain lightning bounces off himself, bounces off the pet, bounces off the brittle guard. That's like 2,000 damage instantly. To say that's not worthy in a group is kind of stupid. But I think it is mostly the player, because in an 8-man group, a melee Thane probably doesn't bring to the group what it probably needs, and will just be overshadowed by any other peel tank. So I mean, it's not that fact that the class is lacking, but it's probably just the way people are wanting to play the class doesn't fit into an 8-man.
But that being said, would you not also agree that with Thanes, if you're saying that it's mostly about the player, you still have to learn that play style. It's not necessarily going to be a hard thing, you know, if you speak to these people, you know. I feel like what you just said there made it sound like it might be a bit difficult for people to get into that sort of mentality. And I'm sure you didn't mean it like that, but just to clear things up for people, I think, you know, you can learn any playstyle you want, just, you know, by talking to the right people and by testing it out yourself.
Yeah, I'm not saying like they're unable to do it. It's just they would have to be willing to do it. I mean, it would almost be like a nature druid complaining not getting grouped into 8-man when, I mean, I feel like they're a good class, but they're just not necessarily desired. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who form groups who are forced to shy away from Thanes because of past experiences with people who aren't willing to adapt to it.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. It sounds like it is viable, and yeah, obviously, nobody is really looking to run a melee Friar at this point either in one of those 8-mans. Let's move on to another question here. And this one may take a little bit longer. Why does your class get groups, or why are they sometimes passed over for a group slot?
Well, I can start off there. Being a Skald, I feel like that's pretty easy to answer. For the most part, people, you know, most people would jokingly say it, but there is a hint of seriousness behind it, in that we're essentially speed bots for the most part. You know, we give you speed, we give you sauce. Obviously, you know, we can bring to the table some DPS, but we're not going to be the main DPS. And at the same time, our utility and crowd control isn't going to be the same as what you would get from a pack healer, or other classes with roots available, or any other kind of crowd control. So that you know, it all depends on the group. I mean, if you're just in it for speed, you can get your horses out. You don't need a Skald then. Then you lose out on sauce, but people have purge. Good group setups wouldn't necessarily need a Skald for sauce either, because they would be set up for that specifically. They would be able to clear the CCs, they would spread out, and they would be able to they'd probably be able to bring more to the table than they would if they had a Skald. You know, you can fit like you know, a berserker in there if you need more DPS, a pack healer if you need a bit more CC. So
yeah, I would have to definitely agree with Silenttspeed on that one. Another drawback to a Skald in a group is their CC mitigation abilities and the lack thereof. They can be a little bit more of a detriment to a group sometimes, basically for a lot of the reasons that Silenttspeed mentioned. You know, no charge. I mean, they can use their R5, but that's still somewhat limited as well.
yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention, which I'm sure you'll also agree with me, is we don't have a lot of, well, we don't have any AoE. You know, we're very much single target. And while I can interrupt 4 people at a time because, you know, I'm quite quick to turn, get the right target, mez him, turn to another one, snare him. I've got 2 DDs for 2 different people. I can hit one with my hammer. You know, it's a lot easier to get that AoE from other classes as well.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on that one.
I posted, you know, a little thing on post count, and, you know, I'll go ahead and just say it out here. Silent's dead on. I'm not an advocate of bringing more CC to the game because we have plenty of it, but to be fair about everything, you know, of the 3 speed classes, and I know that's not part of this discussion, but of the 3 speed classes, Bards, Minstrels, and Skalds. Bards have almost 7 forms of CC. Minstrels have 4, and Skalds have 2. And Skalds do not have any DMES. So, I mean, you know, we're kind of limited on Skalds just doesn't really bring much to the table except great in solo, but in a group, you know, there's nothing.
Except you got to run the speed because everybody else does.
Or everybody's running horses.
Yeah, and
Yeah, you
that
horse
brings me back
horses.
to my original point. You know, if you don't have a Skald, you can't find one, or you don't need one, you just pull out your horses, and you're good. The only thing you do lose is that sauce, really. And I'm not going to say that's really a weakness of the class, because it's all dependent on the other players, but it's, you know, I can only, you know, very rarely I can go an hour and a half without finding a group in a big battle group where there's lots of groups with open space, you know, so.
You got to have the Skald in a group. Just to run down when you get in a fight to catch those last 3 or 4 guys or whatever, you don't have time to call up your horse and catch them and everything like you do when a Skald's right with you and chasing. Or if they're just right with them and they're running, or vice versa. If you're running from them, you've got to have the
And that
speed
would be
because
where the
everybody else
advantage is.
runs.
And that's fine. You know, I would just say that, you know, we need to bring something to the table to assist them. That's all I'm saying. You know, why can't they have DMES ability? Why can't they have some type of AoE ability? That's all I'm asking.
Skald needs a little love, yes. I agree with that too.
Okay, well, we're going to get here shortly, maybe actually next question, to some proposals from you guys, but let's continue maybe down to Thane's. Caps, do you ever have troubles getting a group, or why, if not, why do people want you in their group, other than that, you know, you're a great player?
Well, I lead my own group, so it usually doesn't take very long. I've got a group up, so I just start the group. So I'm personally never looking for a group, but I can see where things, and we got the bad reputation of the hammers and breaking mezzes and stuff like that. So that's where the 8-mans don't really, and we're low on melee damage, you know. But we've got bodyguard and stuff, you know. We still add to the group, but you know, there's just a little lacking there with it, I guess. To where, and with the bad reputation, you know, with the Zergs and 100 fighting 100, you know, it's me hammers you get out, you know, it's great. When you're fighting 8-man, you're just a guy with a shield and a hammer, you know. Because you're not going to be throwing other than, you know, the singles and the instants and stuff we have like that maybe. But you're not going to be throwing out the hammers, and that's where probably people have always got in their head that, you know, don't want that Thane in my group. I don't want that Thane in my group, you know. Other than that, Thane's fine in the group. And I, you know, personally, you know, my position, I don't look for groups. I don't have to, you know that.
Okay, and Tanky, what about you?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't quite remember the question.
Sure. Basically, do you have trouble getting groups? Do you get passed over? If so, why? If not, why do people want you in their groups?
You know, yes and no. Because of, like Captain, people recognize names in the game. They're going to want you in that group. Most times they want my shaman. If they so happen to have a shaman, then maybe luckily I can throw out and run with the Thane. The Thane is great in a Zerg because it creates a whole bunch of interrupts for the opposing enemy, especially if you have enough of them. Getting a group is really not that hard. I think what really plays into effect of if you're Zerging or you're 8-manning. If you're 8-manning, the first thing you don't want to do is start throwing out AoE hammers. So people are going to be a little reluctant to invite a Thane because that's the first thing that comes to their head. Well, this guy's just going to start AoE and everything. So, you know, I guess it kind of goes both ways.
Okay. Hashtag Vegamite 2K16. What about you as a champ?
I don't see champions really having that much difficulty getting groups outside of maybe a specific group might want like a hero to have a little more magic absorption and to be a little more soaking ability. But the fact that a champion is unshearable with his specs buffs and the stat debuffs are pretty powerful, they really don't have very much issues outside of like being CCable, and then they die to casters fairly easy, but I mean everything else kind of makes up for it.
Sure, and Reck, if you can actually do the small man first. Basically, if you ever try to small man, do you have trouble getting groups, or do people want you for any specific reason?
Personally, I think Paladins are a great class in just about every setup. The only time that I see that Paladin might get overlooked for a different class is if either the setup is going to be primarily caster based, where you're looking for something where perhaps like a Mauler will be slightly better BG. I feel like anytime that there's a hybrid or a mostly tank train, there's going to be at least one Paladin in the group with the celerity and the AFG, and plus the magic ablative is pretty strong, considering the low delve of it. It actually builds up rather quickly. I would say primarily the biggest time that, like I said, is when a Mauler is when I don't see a Paladin in a group, and I think a lot of that has to do with their ability to CC and have a nice BG and the lack of CC upon them through their buff and their stoicism abilities.
And what about solo? Why specifically do you like soloing on a pally? What does it bring to the table that you find fun?
They're super overpowered.
It's a really strong solo class. The ability to heal yourself through combat in your rank 5. When I originally started doing solo, the rank 5 would cut out your chance, so that was kind of an annoyance. But in today's day of template building, where you can get 25% buff and heals going on, I feel like their survivability is extremely strong against, at least against melee type characters. And then if you're going with a shield spec, you know, they're even harder to hit and can outlast just about every melee out there. I'd say the only tanks that I consistently have troubles with are going to be rank 5 plus champions with their rank 5. The plate armor is pretty susceptible to their rank 5.
Okay, maybe we'll go back up the list. Reck, if you could add anything to pallies that you think would make them a little bit better to play, maybe get more people playing them, what would it be, and then why?
I'm a huge advocate of getting stoicism, not just on paladins, but on champions and on things. I haven't really evaluated too much for Skalds, but that's, I mean, I'll leave that to them. I'd like to see their insta-res on, I think it'd be kind of cool to have it on a much longer timer, but not have to worry about the res sickness effect of it, although with the new pots in, it's not a big deal. and nobody wants to have free roam abilities like the perfect recovery or. And then also, I feel like with the champion abilities, their chant line is kind of not quite as strong with when it comes to resist. They're, for the most part, I believe it's the champion line's either 8 or 10%. It's been a little bit since I actually delved it, but I don't find myself twisting the combo chants for that very often. Just the primary specific chant for it. So I'd say maybe combining the stronger resists together to where they don't override each other, but or share a timer rather. Better than that, I feel like paladins are a really strong class, and for the most part, I feel like they are fairly balanced with. That you can CC them, take them out of the fight pretty well, but in a melee fight, they're gonna hold their own.
So are you talking about for the resist, like the 20%, sort of combining them into two, like the champ resists?
Not necessarily combining them, just not sharing a timer for them. Like there's the cooldown timer for them. There's
Right.
Yeah, I believe it's split up into two different timers where it is like the combo, and it's kind of just like a big mess to do it all. But I mean, with most paladins out there today, just macro chain anyway. So combining them really wouldn't make a difference between just removing the timers.
Anything else you think could get people more interested in pallies?
Honestly, I mean, I feel like they're a strong class, and they already have a pretty strong base of people wanting to play them. Aside from those changes, I really can't think of anything that would make them more enticing to play. They're extremely fun, in my opinion. That's why I play it.
Thanks. Maybe to Vegamite next.
For champions, the only thing I would really say is maybe increasing the spell range on their debuffs. Right now, it's only 1,000 range, so maybe to add a little more group utility if they're 1,500. But in terms of adding stoicism to the champion, obviously it'd be nice, but I really don't think it's needed or anything like that. I would rather see some classes lose stoicism and have it only be left on the heavy tanks. But that's just a general realm balance. I think there's too much CC reduction in this game as there is. I mean, if a sorcerer has a blanket mez on a tank group, like 6 out of 8 people in that group are out of mez in 10 seconds. So, I don't know.
Okay, anything else?
I don't know, maybe some like cool looking weapons, but I mean, the class itself is in a really good place. I mean, if somebody chooses a hero over a champion, it's mostly just preference, whether they want more defaulted survivability or they really want abilities which will help their survivability. So.
Okay, let's move on to Thane's. Tanky, can you give us sort of, your pitch as to what you think could improve the class?
That's kind of a tough call. I think this class is very solid right now. I don't think we really need much of anything. I would like to see some test data on the melee damage tables. Years ago, it was mentioned that we were on the seer table and not on the hybrid table. I cannot confirm nor deny that. I don't know. But a lot of the boost that's been happening, they moved Chain Lightning from RR5 down to an actual line into Storm. We got a new RR5, we got Self-Pierce. So, I really think Thanes are in a good place. They really are a pretty solid class. I can't think of anything that they really need, to be honest with you.
Okay, what about you, Cap? You got any thoughts on that?
The big thing that's been on top of my list for a long time with Thanes is our armor factor. Definitely Definitely the damage. I mean, I've got that written down in 3 different questions here. But I would like to see our anytime styles. Our combo is really low, and then we got provoke. It's really low, and then everything else is a side or a backer. And almost everybody else has a higher, anytime style, anytime combo. We don't have that either. We're a little low on that. But the biggest thing is the armor factor. If you look at the other tunes that are in our class across the board there, you look at our armor factor, we're sometimes half of what the others are. And it would help a lot in the groups and help a lot, I think, with the 8 versus 8, being able to get into groups, because you'd be able to be you don't have to be a true peel tank, but a little more help there. And then the armor factor because we do take a lot of damage whenever we get hit. I mean, in melee. But other than that, I think the Thane's it's the funnest class in the game, and I've tried them all. It's hard to beat it.
Silent, what about you? We're talking about Skalds now. Anything you think would improve the playability of that class?
Well, first of all, just a quick counter question. Are we talking more along our ability lines and styles, or are we going overall with realm abilities included?
You can be as broad as you want on this one. Whatever comes to mind for you.
Okay, well, I do have a pretty extensive list, but I'll try to break it up into pretty even chunks, so I'm not the only Skald speaking, because that would be a bit unfair. But I think for starters, I would like to go back to my earlier point about us not having much of an AoE presence in groups, and I think what would help people in groups more, and the class as a whole, to get into a group, is if maybe our snare was changed into an AoE, like a small radius snare which affected multiple targets. It might help us when people are trying to run. We can't always catch people because we're being hit, or people are peeling on us and we're trying to catch casters, healers ourselves. So I think that might be a bit helpful. And I know a few people have expressed concerns about a DMES, similar in a similar vein to our MES ability. Either how it has, you give us a DMES, for example, and it has a cooldown, the same cooldown as the MES with 30 seconds, or if they share a cooldown, which then provides you a choice. Are you going to DMES one of your allies, or are you going to go on the offense and MES someone that's a higher priority target? What are you going to do to help your group? What's more important? So those are my first few points, but I think it'd be best to go to the other Skald now and see what he thinks.
Well, I'm definitely with you on the AoE aspect of the Skald. I think that they would definitely benefit from it. But I would also like to see something like determination or stoicism added to a Skald. Like I mentioned before, they can be a detriment to a group, mid-fight, Mez or Root, and they're just about out of the fight until the enemy turns back on them. Those are my biggest things with this Skald and what I would like to see changed with them.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. You mentioned earlier, and I did say I think that might be a good idea. It could prove to be, I don't want to say overpowered, because that's not the right word, but maybe it would make us a bit more powerful in that sense, because CC, well, MES, it's going to be harder to keep us suppressed, and obviously the kind of class we are, the utility interrupting class, that's going to provide us with a bit more danger on the field as well. So that could be useful, but it depends on how the wider community see it. The other Skalds, would they like it, or do they think, no, we don't need this? I'd be interested to hear other people's thoughts on that as well. But another point of mine that I would like to mention with our class is our realm abilities. I've noticed recently that, well, not recently, obviously I've always known about the realm abilities available to us, but we do have in my opinion, two useless realm abilities in the way of Mystic Crystal Law and Raging Power. Very similar abilities that replenish your power pool. As a Skald, we don't really use too much of our power pool. With 50 battle songs, we can get Epiphany, which helps not just us, but our group as well. But with the kind of cooldowns we have on our spells, we don't really need to replenish our power pool. So I would love if we could perhaps maybe remove those two and introduce a few people have said Static Tempest, but one that I would prefer more would be Thornweed Field. I think that's an excellent ability, and it would also go again back to my earlier point about us not having an AoE presence. You give us that realm ability, and it lets us help out when we're trying to defend a keep. When we're out on the field, it gives us a bit more utility to control a certain area while we focus elsewhere as an individual. So, yeah, there's quite a lot of things that maybe could be done, but also taken away from us to implement these, perhaps.
Hey, if I may interrupt real quick, Co, I got a bell, man. I got something going on here. Kaptkent's going to take over for me. I'm sorry, dude.
Hey, man, I appreciate your giving us your input, and I'm glad you got to give us some stuff for the Thanes.
Yeah, man. Good luck. I'm sorry.
But if you want to go back to the Skalds real quick, I just wanted to say I don't really think the AoE snare is a good idea, but the DMS sharing timer, that kind of interesting. But the biggest thing for Skalds, I would say, is looking at the sword line, maybe adding something in there, because I don't think I've ever seen a sword Skald, just because I don't know if it's because hammer's that much better or axe is that much better.
Well,
but
from a perspective of a Skald, I'll go. As you said, you don't think the AoE snare would be a good idea, but I think the way you could do that is you have a small radius on it, so it's only going to affect people if they're close together. So if groups playing smart, it's only going to affect one, maybe two people anyway if they're being smart. In a BG, when a lot of guys come running at you, maybe it only affects 6 targets at the most. Or 4 targets. Just something that gives us the opportunity, maybe. So. I do understand your point there, and I think in the right hands it could be very powerful, but at the same time it's going to be one of those trainable abilities. You have to learn to use it in the right situations.
What about the new champ abilities, Silent? And obviously you could, if you wanted, spec AoE dot or whatever. Are you looking for something different when you talk about an AoE interrupt?
Well, obviously I understand with the champ abilities you can achieve this AoE disease or poisons, but personally I think that our points are best spent elsewhere. I've spent a bit of time respecing my champ abilities. There's a few that I think I need to have, and some that I could have. It's changeable. But I'm looking, like I said, I'm just looking for us to have a bit more of an AoE presence on the field. So, I mean, I understand in one sense you give us AoE, it's going to be a bit difficult, because it does change up our class a little bit. It gives us a bit more utility and again AoE presence. So I don't know. I guess. You've got to look at the grand scheme of things. How is this going to affect the class, and how are other people going to react to our class having this? Should it be implemented?
Okay, well, thanks, guys. I'd like to transition a little bit, if we've still got time, to some of the things most of these classes have the ability to do, and I just throw out a couple of questions, and if you guys use this or don't, just feel free to say. So we've already talked a little bit about interrupts, but personally I think they're extremely underutilized, and these classes can definitely bring it to bear. But I guess before we talk about that, or maybe in conjunction with that, is there a steep learning curve to using interrupts, and do you use them, and if so, how? Reck, do you want to start? You've kind of got the solo small man thing going.
Um, I have the instant stun, the instant taunt rather, as the interrupt that I primarily use. It's just pretty handy. Outside of that, I do spec for the CL disease. I find that it's the best way for me to catch people, and it offers a pretty good interrupt without breaking any sort of CC if I am going to be in a group. Compared to Dot. Outside of that, I don't spec Battlemaster very often. That's just a personal choice. So I don't have the thrown weapon. It's not a bad spec. I just prefer Warlord. But I don't feel like there's a steep learning curve for using the interrupts on them. There's just not very many of them.
Okay, and hashtag Vegamite 2K16. What about you on a champ? How would you? I mean, are interrupts important and all that?
You classify the DD and snare as interrupt, and then you also classify the debuffs
well, that's the
almost
question.
as another
How
interrupt.
do you use it?
Obviously you want to use them sparingly when you have to, as a survivable, like the last ditch effort type thing. But also using dex debuffs and strength debuffs on tanks, whatever. It really does limit the amount of damage people can do to you. So, if you're using your sealed disease properly, if you're DDing and snaring at the right times, you are pretty difficult to actually kill. But if you're caught with your timers down and whatnot, you're gonna drop quickly to the caster. But
what master level?
I think it's, master levels. I think that's a cool part of champion. I'm sure 90% go Banelord, but I'm pretty sure the highest ranked champion pre-Yomain merger was Dawgs, and he was Battlemaster, so it kind of proves that both are plenty viable. Plus, having the endo reduction on a champion allows you to use Battlemaster styles more, but both are plenty viable. Even though dumping Bob Bane Spike on target is pretty cool.
Okay, and this is sort of a follow-on question for you, and then secondly for the Skalds. Obviously, you guys have these DDs that could function as an interrupt, or maybe if someone needs an assist on something. How, specifically the DDs, what's your choice for those?
Well, for champion, I don't know of any champion that templates to have their DDs hit hard. But if you want me to start something for Skalds, if I grouped with the Skald and I saw him dump both DDs on a target and there wasn't much else CC out, I'd be pretty upset because he could use those DDs for so much more than 200 damage on a target that's not going to die. You can't just dump everything into one target and then not having to interrupt somebody else.
Okay, Silent, anything to add for the interrupts? You already talked a little bit about interrupts earlier, but how do you use your DDs?
Well, it all depends on the situation. If I'm with my group, we'll run in. You're not gonna get everyone interrupted at the same time, which is where I feel I come in. I can either tab target, which obviously isn't as effective because you're just getting the nearest guy, or I can choose my highest priority targets. So usually the healers or the most the casters with the highest damage output. So I would target one, hit him with my DD, target another, hit him with my other DD. I've got a mez for whoever I think is the most important player in that group. Again, casters and healers are mostly my targets. Then I have my snare, which it functions as an interrupt briefly, but it also, as do the DDs, but it also gives me that time to choose who I'm going to then attack with my hammer. So, and then from there I would use my snares on different targets. I would mez different targets, and my DDs then become my focus for an attack. While I'm not temped or I use my DDs for damage. You know, they're not there really to do the most damage. It does give me that bit of extra DPS and allows me to focus down a target with my group. You know, helps the MA out. So.
Okay, do you, Zadrie, did you want to hit anything on interrupts?
For the most part, I'm pretty much in agreement with Silent there in the way he uses his interrupts. I really don't feel it's a great idea to sit there and dump everything into one target. You're just wasting them all, where you could take and spread around and hit multiple targets. You know, and just basically keep that backfield interrupted. Yeah, that's really about where I'm at with the interrupts.
Okay, this seems like more of an obvious question, but Thanes, what do you do for interrupts? And how big of a role is that for your class?
Well, I lead BGs, so it's hard to tell like the normal person plays in a group, I guess. But I go into fights. I'm running a BG. I'm trying to fight 30 against 70 or whatever a lot of times and stuff like that. So I run in with my ST and I basically start hammering on a target. And I usually set somebody else as an MA to run in. A lot of times it's silent even. You know, have him run in, get targets, and I'm throwing hammers. We're just the interrupt machine. If you can just get on my targets and follow the hammers in, usually we do pretty well. But a smart Thane will look at his abilities and he can see that he can add a lot to that going in with the chain lightnings, the instants, the shouts, the mocking. You know, yeah, we are the interrupt machine. There's no doubt about that. Nobody likes blue hammers thrown on their head.
From a group perspective, I prefer to use my hammer or whatever else to interrupt, because I like to save the insta DD and chain lightning for like a blap to just like totally insta kill somebody. I mean, yeah, if I have to, I'll use it to rub somebody, but ideally I save it to when I can debuff and then just really put some DPS into somebody.
Right, that's why you need to go to 50 SC. That way you get the Doom Hammer, you get the chain lightning. Like you just said, I can pop in there and I try to get the last kill of the fight a lot of times. So my name is the last one spammed up on the line, you know. So I go in there, right, like you just said, that last kill, Doom Hammer, chain lightning me, instant, get up on him, shout him, slam him with my shield. I try to get that kill steal right at the end.
Man, Kaptkent, big ego, man.
Hey, do you mind if I jump in on things there?
Yeah, please.
One thing I do is, from the small and like 8-man perspective, typically I'm playing the bodyguard role. So I'm guarding the healers and the casters in the backfield. One thing I'm doing, even when I'm bodyguarding, is I'm keeping an eye out for any free casters, whether it's a healer or another caster in the enemy's backfield, and I'll do what I can to interrupt them while I'm also bodyguarding. You know, whether it's hit them with a insta DD or drop a static or a chain on them. You know, that's how I personally use my instas.
Okay, now we've got 4 tanks here of a sort that maybe in this been said don't quite have the survivability of heavies. For the newer players, any advice you guys would give on how to stay within heal range of your support, and if you do go out, get back alive?
Make a face macro.
Well, anyone who knows me knows I die a lot, and I'm quite prone to overextending myself. But that being said, that's not because I'm not trying to. Obviously, when I'm running with Cap, as we've both mentioned, sometimes on the MA, so you get hit with a lot of CC and a lot of damage. I have enough survivability to keep myself alive either while I'm fighting or while I'm getting back into heal range. But what I would say to the newer players, or perhaps the less experienced players, is just make sure you understand the role of your class and the role you play within your group. If you're in a battle group, you're either, you're going to be in a set position almost. If you're in an 8-man, make sure that you know what that group want of you, where they want you to be, what they want you to be doing, and just overall ask other people, for feedback. Ask if you're doing the right thing, if you're doing the wrong thing. Constructive criticism is one of the best things you can get in this game. Even if it's someone that has never played your class, people observe other classes. I've got one of every class on Midgard. That being said, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on any of them or anything like that, but I observe people enough that I play with to know a certain degree of how to play safe with each class.
I mean, obviously asking people for help is a great idea, but I mean, you could also read. I think Oxnard posted a little document saying just of like different scenarios and what you should do. I mean, I think a good standard for anything but the Thane is like when in doubt, just seal disease. I mean, if you're the most forward person in your group, you should probably turn around a little bit. I don't see a Thane having an issue running out of range of heals, but I mean, it's just knowing the situations and not being so focused on killing something that you get yourself killed. You gotta play within yourself.
Gotta stay away from the bloodlust.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're chasing after one kill and then when you pan your camera, you're within 50 albs and you don't see another mid for another 1,500 units, you're gonna die.
Okay, a couple of times, pin and sort of the nerf to shield spec came up. Do you guys ever use num or pin? And if so, like, what situationally would you do that for? Maybe starting with Reck on this one.
Personally, I think num is cheap and I refuse to use it. I just don't like it.
Actually, I saw a video of Camille or something like that, some French Paladin, and he was using num just to slow something down to side snare him with his weapon in a group play. It was kind of interesting, but I actually kind of prefer the 5-second slam on hybrid classes, especially while you're peeling, because on my Thane, if I slammed and snared somebody, they're snared for 19 seconds, and then after that snare's up, there's only a 6-second window to where I can slam them again and snare them again. It is convenient, the fact that the immunity timer is so much lower for peeling, but it makes it definitely harder to cast on them and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it makes the DPS window obviously smaller.
I think that window really affects Thane, like the caster Thanes more than it would as a paladin. If I'm going to be fighting somebody, I'm going to be up in their face anyway, whether they're a 5-second stun or not. If they're stunned and they're trying to get away from me, I'm going to be hitting them in the back. If they're a caster, I'm obviously going to try and not get CC'd, but I don't feel like the stun length is a huge issue, especially with the immunity timer. But that's me.
But also for a pin, I never addressed that. I'm actually not a very big fan of it. I understand that it doesn't break on damage, but I just feel it's too low duration and you invest too many points for it. I mean, if you're going 42 shield anyways for the slam, that's cool. But I'd rather apply a long duration snare for peeling. I mean, it's obviously awesome when you pin somebody and you have a caster train on them. They can't really get out of it because they're still snared. It's definitely situational.
Okay, are there any other tricks to using your class proficiently that any of you guys are willing to share? Obviously, I know some of this stuff's probably secret and you want to be able to keep winning your fights, but...
Yeah, we can't tell everything.
Well, for me, I'm pretty open. I'm all up for helping people who want to play the same class as me. All I would say is make sure you understand, if you're templated, make sure you understand that template. Look at what abilities your items can give you. Look at the variety of potions available to you, and look at how you can improve your class to your playstyle. So for me, I'm starting to move into the phase of I want to do more damage. So I'm looking at where I can improve my damage, but also I'm looking along the sidelines at how can I be a bit tougher to kill. What's my survivability like, and I use a lot of my items within my template to give me that. Whereas some players without that template, without that good template, might not have the same. So then they have to look at where they can either get that template or how they can substitute that with either realm abilities or with cheaper items to gather that might not necessarily fit in their template, but will most certainly help them in situations like that.
For champions, I would definitely say use your debuffs and use them often. I mean, if you're not very agile, I would just macro them to where you have one for caster, one for tanks. So tank macro would have dehaste and all that stuff. Caster macro would have intel debuff. But just a small thing for Thanes is actually use the debuff. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful tool that very few Thanes truly utilize.
I would say a big thing too is to have a good situational awareness, like for at one of the tanks here, not just paladins, but if you don't have very many ranged interrupts, trying not to fight, a caster out in the open field, trying to use the terrain to your advantage, and also know your weapons. So like if you're going to be running a dominantly legendary template, know what the armor resistances are. Don't use a heat on somebody that's resistant to cold, or vulnerable to cold rather, and just make sure that you're swapping appropriately.
Another thing for that situational awareness, like there's no rule in this game that says you have to chase somebody till you die. You can always turn around, reset the fight. On a tank, you don't have to push till you die. You can always stop and seal disease.
Anybody else have anything they want to share on that? Just tips and tricks for your class?
Yeah, I got one little one. Might laugh at, but I won't tell it. But for like lower, younger things, I know it's hard to get your melee and your casting up, until you get, you're talking about templates and everything. Well, everybody starting off doesn't have a template. And one thing that I did early was like the Halloween hat, and I got me a staff that like maxed my casting speed, damage, range. So all that was maxed out. So when we got in these places where we were fighting on defense and all that, I would throw those on, but you could quickly switch to your one-hander on your quick bar. Poof, you're back in the fight if they get on you. But it's one way to increase your magic without having that full template and everything. That way you can keep your melee and your survivability with a Thane. But when you get in those situations, you have items that max out what you really need, because you don't need to hit with a hammer as hard as you can when you're casting at a distance. And one thing I did was switch in and out items according to situation, if that makes sense and everything.
You guys have mentioned it a couple of times, but the legendaries, it sounds like some of you use them maybe to debuff Wrath of Champions or whatever. Has anybody been using or had success using the new leggies?
Oh, definitely. As a Skald, and this I guess lines up with the tips and tricks for Skalds. If you can find or afford one of these legendaries, I would most recommend a body legendary, body damage, because once that procs, it gives your opponent a 35% debuff to body, which then directly plays in with your own abilities. Your DDs will do a bit more damage, but as well as that, because your hammer is doing that elemental damage, you're going to hit a lot harder. I've noticed about a 50 damage increase on my DDs when that procs. It's not a lot, but over 2 DDs it's an extra 100 damage. That takes it up to like maybe 300, 400 damage total I've just done instantly. And then I'm following up with my hammer, which, depending on my group setup, I can hit anywhere between 100, because you've got good resist, good defense, or I can hit like I was today, where I hit a guy for 700, 800 damage. It's not going to happen all the time, but you can hit people mid-range about 300, 400 regularly with these weapons, I find, and I think they are brilliant. I don't think you can get much better weapons than these right now.
I own a one-hander and a two-hander. And I just got my two-hander today and went out for a while with it. And I love the legendaries. So Thanes, get the energy one.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with both. I especially love to use the energy debuff prior to doom hammering someone on my Thane. Just get some really nice spike damage off both the weapon damage and the proc off of it.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to quickly mention something. I apologize for interrupting there. But I don't know if you were going to get to this or not, but I think if we could get to maybe what's wrong, so to speak, with our classes soon, not just the disadvantages, but perhaps like bugs with our classes, that'd be pretty useful.
Yeah, that's fine. And right before we start that, let me just shout out to the people typing in chat. I know you guys are having some excellent sidebar conversations, but if you do want to ask a question, just ask it and we'll try and incorporate it in here. And as we are wrapping up, think about adding it pretty soon. Silent, did you want to start on that topic? It's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I'd love to. I guess I'll combine two things in one here. What's wrong with our classes, i.e. the bugs with our classes, and also I'd like to do a slight comparison between some of the classes, even though we're not all in the same vein. One thing that a lot of Skalds have said to me, and what we've all noticed, is that our speed, it doesn't always work as intended. I noticed earlier my whole group had my Skald speed. I did not. I hadn't been in combat. I was running for a good 20 seconds without my speed, and everyone else just kept running around me, waiting for my speed to pick up. Nothing was happening. A lot of the times we have to recast. Other times there's people in group that don't have speed. It just drops off randomly. And I notice a lot when I'm running away from people. I don't know how this happens. It's not like, they can just be in clip range, so I'm just about seeing them, but my speed will just magically drop off then, and I'm not entirely sure how. I'm sure obviously it's just a bug with our speed, but I think that's something that needs to be looked into alongside most of our other chants. There's a few things that could be tweaked with them. As well as that, there's our power regen chant. Healers have a big complaint with our power regen chant because a lot of the time it overrides their POM, which is their power regen castable ability. Their castable buff, and they complain a lot about it. So for me, I don't even run it on my bars really. It's off on some bar where I'm never going to accidentally hit it. The same with the resists. That overwrites champion resists. It removes them outright, and you'd have to recast them once the chant is over. Where I feel it would be easier for them to coexist, and the more powerful one of the two takes priority.
That can also lead to like a griefing issue. I mean, I've seen people purposely just chant those resists just to screw with somebody, get rid of the CL resist.
Yeah, that does happen a lot. You'll get Skalds who run Croc Ring and they'll run past groups or BGs and they'll drop their resist chants and their power chant, and a lot of the time this disrupts the flow of RVR because these people, they're missing out on stuff they had before. And they're going to be less effective in a fight. They're not going to be. It's not like they're going to lose a fight because of it, but it does disrupt the flow of it, and they're going to have to go back and rebuff it at some point.
Anybody else have issues they want to talk about?
Sure. I mean, I really don't have an issue with any champion abilities. I think it's well-rounded class.
Yeah, I haven't run into any of those issues.
I mean, I do have a few more if nobody else has got anything to say regarding that. A lot of my notes came from Skald feedback, other players, so it's not just all me. I can assure you that I'm not just complaining about my class. I promise.
Yeah, definitely with the Thane, I would like the armor factor looked into, and another thing is our primary damage. Uh, I know that, like Tanky said earlier, that we were on a seer skill. I would definitely want that looked into. If we are, that's, that all my other issues are taken care of. If there could be a boost there, definitely, like I said, it would help with our peeling and, between the primary damage and our AF, I would definitely like to see a little increase in our AF, because other tanks we're fighting, if you look at what we got and what they've got, it's, you can see the difference.
I think it'd be more of having it scale higher depending on your weapon spec. I mean, I don't think you should really get that much boost if you're only running 32 hammer, but maybe if you're running 50 hammer, then there should be more benefit.
Well, right, if there was more benefit, I would run 50 hammer.
Yeah, one other thing I'd like to mention, I am actually in game right now because I did lose some of my notes, so I'm having to refer to people. The heal chant for Skalds doesn't work in combat. It doesn't, I've never seen it have an effect. It's not on my bars again, and I think comparing it to a Paladin, theirs can stack. As far as I'm aware, there's stacks, and it does work in combat as well as it being a better heal anyway. And I think while a Paladin and a Skald aren't anywhere near the same class, the difference between the two chants there is that ours isn't as good. It's significantly weaker, and therefore the Paladins there have the advantage with the chants.
Well, it's actually two different types of chants. I mean, the Paladin chant is chanting heal. I mean, so it physically heals them 32 over every time it pulses, while the Skald one is just a health regen. It would be the same thing as a pot health regen, which I know cancels when you're have a bleed, or not bleed, bleed or disease. So that might be why you're not seeing it in combat. But I mean, it definitely does heal you while you're not bled or diseased.
But I'm not going to say every Skald, but from most of the Skalds I've spoken to that have mentioned the heal chant, they say it doesn't work at all. And what's the point in us having an ability if we're not going to see the benefits of it? I think it should be very similar to the Paladin one. I think it would benefit better if it was like the Paladin one.
Yeah, but I think the reason that they're not seeing a benefit from it is because there's no like delve. This is what it's healing for. It's just like passive health regen, just like anything else.
Yeah, but
I mean, I'm not saying wouldn't be a good idea to change it towards a Paladin's chant, but I mean, it's just like a bard's heal song.
One thing for the Paladin's chant too, it only works in combat. Outside of combat, it offers no bonus or no healing.
But it still doesn't take away from the point that it's a significantly better ability. You can fight a Paladin, and they will just consistently heal and heal and heal. On top of all the other stuff they already have, which is fair enough. That's the advantages of their class, and I understand that. I'm not saying that they're overpowered. I'm not saying that they can't be beaten. However,
I get that one's better than the other, but it's not apples to apples because they're two different abilities. I mean, you'd be more inclined to compare yours towards the minstrel health regen buff, because the Paladin is a unique ability of that class. Like no other class in the game has that health regen, or it has that heal pulse, whatever it is. I mean, I get that one's better than the other, but I mean, to say that like Midgard's health regen buff that the Skald has isn't as good as Albion's is because you're not comparing it to Albion's heal chant. Albion's heal chant is the minstrel.
So let's go back to the initial issue at hand. Maybe then it is a bug perhaps that needs to be looked into, that people are saying it's not working in combat. No one is seeing the effect of it from the people I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot of people. I've been preparing for this podcast for 3 months, so in that time I've had, I play every day, so I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of people. So at the very least, it needs to be looked into, because people aren't happy with our songs as a whole, our chants. And that being said, again, I'm going to make another comparison to the Paladin, which, again, I understand two different classes, advantages to each class. But the damage add for a Paladin, they do get a significantly better celerity, and while we can get this from celerity pots or healers giving us celerity, Paladins don't need that. They can use it in combat. It makes them better. I'd say it makes them a bit better in a small man solo fight. Obviously, it can have a bit of an impact in a group, but it's not going to have as much. And I think the same could be said for a Skald's celerity, which is 15% if I'm right, and the Paladin's is 37, which would match up with the healer, the Orc healer, red celerity.
So we've got a question here, and I'm not 100% sure that we can take it, but basically, it's from Karlslav. He wants to know about run-throughs, losing his quick cast, basically the line of sight because they go behind you. I don't think this podcast can really give you a good answer. Is there going to be a fix? I know in the past, Broadsword has said when they designed the game, you can run through people, and that's going to continue. As far as, is there going to be some sort of small radius behind you, like whereby you can still melee someone who's slightly behind you? Maybe. That's definitely something that can be talked about. I don't know if any of you guys want to comment on run-throughs. Do you use them when you're fighting, say, a caster?
Sure.
Not all the time. Sorry, I didn't mean to go first. Sorry, it just came to mind. I did have a fight like this the other day, and I hit my RR5, which obviously gives me that immunity. The guy was trying to CC me, which would have turned the fight in his advantage. And once it was over, and I noticed him trying to quick cast, I did do a run through, which prevented him from casting what I can only assume would have been a stun, and it won me the fight. As soon as I did that run through, he couldn't cast because he wasn't facing me. I hit him 2 more times, and he was dead. So. It's very much a part of the game that I think you have to look to use. It's not always the most honourable way of playing, but you have to look at ways you can get the advantage.
I personally see a significant difference in a caster spiraling and not letting a tank hit it versus a tank simply running through and not letting a caster have line of sight. I mean, if a caster felt inclined, it would wait and then face right before he finished and then land the spell. I mean, so it's not like a caster can't counter it, while as sometimes when a caster spirals a tank, there's little a tank can really do outside of like stopping, and then even then, the caster has a chance of getting away because you stop your sprint. And I mean, in general, it's kind of a cheesy tactic, but it goes both ways with casters versus tanks and tanks versus casters. So, I mean, it really is kind of just a play-to-win type deal, I guess.
What about items? Sorry, Cap.
I was just saying a little lag in that could be an advantage or disadvantage, or not even intentional.
What about items? I know there's been a lot of new items in some of them. There's been some whining. In years past, especially on some of these hybrid classes, it was pretty hard to cap everything. Do you guys find it easier to cap stuff? And then are there any items in game that you really get a good use out of?
I personally like maddening scholars for a thing. That's been ever since I've got picking them up. One thing about it is I like the wolf form in case I'm like at the oil or something. You can use the wolf form to get yourself down, a little bit in the crevices instead of sticking your head up. And the maddening scholars is great for a thing. If you can work it into your template, I think it's one of the staples of it.
I feel like I would say templates are much easier to make nowadays with all the newer items, especially much easier to max out everything from previously playing on Classic. I still find myself though heavily ROG dependent for the heal and the buff bonuses, more so the buff than the heal, but it's definitely doable now compared to back at the beginning of your.
Oh yeah, I think the new items have helped here and there. That's definite.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us can, can be summed up in what I'm about to say here. And that's when I got, well, first of all, I can't make templates. I'm not very good at it, so other people have to do that for me. But when it comes to templates, I think hybrid classes are the hardest because in the perspective of a Skald, and I know the same is for Thanes, you have to look at 5 different stats. Um, you know, Obviously you have your main stats which you prioritize, and then you have your secondary stats. And for a Skald, I think you need to have your strength and your con fairly high. You need to have them at a decent level. Your dex and quick on is important, like I mentioned. They're the secondary ones, and they would, they help out our class, all our classes, just that little bit more with what each individual stat brings. But I wouldn't say you need them as high. And then class specific, as a Skald, you need charisma. Now, on my Skald right now, I can tell you what I run with. I have, just give me 1 second. Okay, I run with 113 strength, 101 con, 79 dex, and 80 quick. It's not always the best. Oh, and 73 charisma. It's not the best, but it works for me. It matches the template, matches my playstyle. Obviously, some of the stats aren't as good as we'd like them to be, and I'm always looking for ways to improve that. But I definitely think the new items have been a benefit for my class. And again, all hybrid classes really have a problem templating, so I think this gives us a little bit more help than we had before.
Yeah, I would definitely have to say there's not quite as much give and take as there was before. It is definitely a lot easier to maximize the stats you need to.
Okay, well, maybe time for the people listening in to ask one more question. I've just got one final one here for you guys. I know three of these classes have some really unique abilities on a low reuse timer that nobody else gets. Scalds with their root, Snare Redux, Pallies with their Spec AF Chant, PVA AoE, Cure Disease, Cure All, and then Thanes with the 400 AoE extended range. Now, what would you guys
front
that play?
champions.
Yeah, I don't know that they have anything that nobody else has. Can you think of anything?
Stat buffs. I mean, on a tank, but I mean, other classes have that.
Yeah, I guess where I'm going with this is how do these unique things factor into your play? Like, obviously they don't make you super overpowered or anything like that, but are they things that maybe change the way people want to group with you, or are they useful? How would you respond? Because I can say on Alb, people always complain about Thanes and extended range 400 AoE hammers. How would you guys counter the fact that you have these unique things that nobody else has? What would you say that to them?
Well, every class has that. Every class has something that makes them unique. Most of the Alb casters have a better range than mid or Hib casters. So, and that's just in general with most of their spells. So when you're talking about Thanes, and I'm sure, Cap will go into more detail on this, the AoE hammers, there's nothing wrong with them really. You can avoid it, you can move out of that AoE. Um, there's ways to avoid it. But that being said, that's what makes that class unique. If you got rid of a Thane's AoE hammers, or you nerfed it, so to speak, it's you're not going to get many Thanes in groups anymore. You're not going to get many people who want to play Thanes, because that's part of the appeal, those AoE hammers. They're very fun to look at, and I'm sure, Cap will agree again, they're fun to cast as well.
Well, I'm also, those Thane abilities have been that way since like Devon. It's not like it's been a recent thing. It's just the fact that templates are finally catching up to what the class can do, to where it actually is more viable to play a Thane. I mean, back when you first started, if you wanted to play a caster Thane, you'd have pretty much no melee ability. You'd have like 50 strength and like 50 quickness with that at best. And it is nice to see that the class is finally able to actually perform at what it's supposed to be.
What about you, Reck? How do you play? Do you ever use spec AF chant or the PBAOE cure DCs?
Definitely, yeah. And I think it lends to more of an aggressive play style, since it, especially with the AF buff, you would just be a little silly to not use the AF chant. But when it comes to the AoE timers, I do not use the poison cure at all. I pretty much reserve it just for cure and disease. With how many people have the castable CL disease now, and for classes such as Veil Walkers and Shamans, it's a pretty invaluable tool. And then I'm also a Warlord, so I have a pseudo cure poison through that line as well. I will say that whenever I originally started playing the Paladin, there wasn't a cure disease, and I feel like it was still a strong class without it. But it's definitely a huge bonus to, I believe it's on a 1 minute timer, so.
I don't honestly like to see a few of the Paladin AF abilities nerfed or toned down. Maybe make the chant not stack for the Paladin, but for its group mates or something like that. Because in terms of just raw melee damage absorption, the only thing that can really compete with the Paladin is a Heretic, but it's just a little over the top.
I think you have to look as well at the armor factor a Paladin can achieve in relation to any other class in the game. They can achieve, I mean, I know that's because, they would probably fit into more along the lines of a heavy tank than, say, the rest of our classes would, but their AF gets to be significantly higher than most of our classes could think of, lower level Paladins, you could get probably a level 45 Paladin who's got more armor factor than some of our guys have at 50 fully templated. And I think that's just, again, it's probably one of the bonuses of the class, but I think maybe it could be toned down a little. I'm not going to speak fully for this and say, look, it needs to definitely be changed or anything like that. I think, everything we're saying needs to be looked at to some degree, so.
Well, it wasn't always like that. I mean, it was recent changes that were made to try to make Paladins more groupable, but while it has made them more groupable, it's made them a little bit too overpowered in small man and solo.
I will say that going back to the templates, that being able to have that more easily attainable 25% buff bonus has lent to much higher AF bonuses that we're seeing today. A little bit of kind of like how Vegamite was saying with the things where, I mean, the potential's been there. It's just now that you're seeing it much more often.
It's actually being utilized, yeah.
Okay, well maybe for Zadrie and Silent, specifically the root snare redux, are you guys getting groups because your class has that, or I mean, is that a consideration, or is it just something that was changed and it's there and that's it? I mean, how do you think about that?
I wouldn't say I get a group just because of the mez or the snare. I usually get a group because my group needs a Skald, or just because I happen to be on it. But I will say the tools are nice, especially to stop like casters or healers from kiting.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that there, and I'll second that. Um, I won't I won't get a group because of the abilities I have. Those abilities that you specifically mentioned, at least. I'll get a group because people know me, because or because of my DPS ability combined with those abilities. People aren't going to invite me just for a snare, but that snare obviously it is pretty useful if someone's running away and we need to catch them. If we're being kited by healers or something like that, it's great because you can slow them down. It especially helps when you're trying to run through a speed warp at the same time. You can slow them down and they can't quite kite you as good. So it gives you that advantage to get back in the fight. It definitely it's definitely useful, but it's not the reason we get into groups.
Okay, any changes to your ML lines that you guys would like to see? Either a different line, or if you've got, like, maybe you're Banelord, but you don't want two things to share a time, or anything like that that comes to mind to anyone?
Honestly, not at all. Um, for Skalds, we get Warlord and Sojourner, and I categorize it very simply. Other people are probably not going to agree, but this is the way I see it. Warlord gives you a lot of offensive capability. It helps you out in combat. There's a few different abilities. You can clear pets with the shout. You can third pets especially. It's great for. War Guard is one of my favourites, which increases your melee absorption. There's obviously the passive Siege Master. We can run rams quicker. That helps out a lot. I do love the Warlord line. I think almost everything in it's pretty useful. Um, Whereas I see Sojourner, and even though I know this is more of a popular line for Skalds to go with, I see it as more of an escape tool. You get your Zephyr, you get Phase Shift, Gateway, Mass Gateway, and I don't think it's as useful in my playstyle at least. But I still wouldn't change it. I still wouldn't say, well, we could replace this with that, or I don't think anything needs to be changed in relation to Scald ML lines. I think you've hit the nail on the head pretty well there.
I think that's where I guess me and Silent disagree a little bit. I think one of the Skald's ML abilities could be replaced with something like Banelord to give him a little bit more of the backfield interrupt capabilities, especially in that AoE capacity.
I mean, I don't really see Banelord being a very good fit for Scalds, but in terms of champion, I mean, Banelord, Battlemaster, it's cool. I mean, depending on your playstyle, it fits it either way. I mean, I think it would just be classic complaints about Battlemaster taking too much endo. I mean, even with endo reduction, you can't really spam styles, which I guess is part of the balance. And for Banelord, I mean, they're all cool. I mean, they put the Rupt back on Zone of Mana, which is just really powerful. And the only thing I would say about that is having more people use demoralization. Maybe like updating the tooltip to make it sound more impressive.
As far as Paladins go, I feel like they pretty much nailed exactly what was needed.
Yeah, pretty much things too. With the Battle Master, that gives you this, some abilities to solo and also group out, bodyguard, and then with the Storm Lord is more toward the casting. So whichever way that Thane wants to lead, I think it's really nice MLs for Thanes. You can lean one way or the other. You always take your choice. It's kind of cheap to respec and test something new to also.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions here, and I guess before we end it, I wanted to first of all take a real big thanks to you guys for coming out here for 2 hours and talking to us, and also a shout out to Vanessa. If you haven't checked out his Herald project, definitely do it. If you want to see where your specific class checks out as far as how many RPs they made this past week or whatever. He's got a real excellent page there, and looks like all these classes are about in the same spot as far as the mill they made last week. But if there are no further questions, definitely thanks, and do not forget to tune in next week. Lovely's got, I think, what's going to be the best podcast so far. Excellent lineup, so thanks everyone.
Yeah, just
Thanks
quickly,
for
I'd
having
like to say thanks for giving us the opportunity to represent our class. I really hope that what we've said will be taken into consideration, and you guys will, carefully consider where you go from here, because any change to a class is going to affect how people play it, whether people play it. So, these podcasts are, if they're being used right, then they're the most important thing to the game at the moment. But again, yeah, thank you for having us all.